Hi guys, we're back again with another piece of information. In this case we're looking at an image of a power supply. All computers need some sort of power supply, and what the power supply does is it takes in mains electricity from the wall socket, and from that point on it converts it into the various voltages that's required by the devices within a computer case. Now if you look down here on the right hand side, we can see a mishmash of cables. That's a good way of describing it. It's like spaghetti junction, and all these cables here coming out of the power supply have different connections at the end, and the different connections can plug into things like hard disk drives, right, the motherboard itself, DVD drives and other such devices. You also see a cable here which seems to be plugged here onto the motherboard. Right, now it's supplying power to the motherboard there as well. There's different ways of doing it. That is one way of doing it. What I want to focus on just now instead is the actual power supply itself. This is from a company called Novatech, and it's called a power station. The 300 here represents the fact that it's 300 watts of power, which is a slightly typical power supply. The numbers can usually be higher. Some people who do lots of gaming will say that's not enough power to power up their system and keep it running. Myself, I would say 400 watts is enough, but you can actually buy 800 watts, 900 watts and even higher. They're obviously very expensive. What we'll do is we'll switch over to the Novatech website. There, it's here. I've done a product search, and that power station version itself is no longer being supplied by them, so the 300 watt power supplies are no longer being sold or even produced. They're now producing 400 watts and higher. So this one here says 400 watts power station ATX power supply, and that's a sort of typical power supply. If you look down here, there's various images. This image here shows you the main power supply itself, and in the back there, if you can just about make it out, there's a connection for the power cable, or as I like to call it, the kettle lead, because old-fashioned kettles used to have similar cables. There's a little switch here for switching it on and off, and at the end here, in this mishmash or spaghetti junction of cables, you can see various ends to these cables for different connections. The price itself is quite cheap. It's only, well, 23 quid really, not a lot of money at all. And what I'll do is I'll scroll down a little bit, and as I scroll down we can find some information down here. One of them says specification, and from specification you can get more information. Now it's strange how lots of people who supply power supplies don't actually give you a lot of detail. If you go to websites like eBuyer, you'll find very little detail in some products, but luckily for us, Novatech have quite a lot of information. It says 24 pin ATX number 1, basically says there's one connection which is 24 pins, and that gets plugged directly onto the motherboard. You'll see a demonstration of that later on. And look through the rest of the things. This one says EPS or CPU 1, right, and it says it's 4 pins. Basically that's the other connection I showed in the diagram, and that's plugging into the motherboard as well. PCIe, that's to do with advanced graphics, and it says here they have one as well, which means it can provide power to a separate graphics card or other PCIe device. SATA, there are 3 connections. You're allowed to plug in 3 SATA devices. If you find that's not enough, you can actually purchase extenders that will plug into one of the SATA connections and extend the SATA connections itself. It says here the 4-pin peripheral 3. Now these ones here are really these things called Molex connectors. And again, they're sort of legacy because a lot of devices are SATA, so you could use one of these connections and plug in an extension cable that converts the Molex end into a SATA end to provide more power to more SATA devices. And the last one there says floppy, meaning floppy disk drive, and let's just ignore that. We don't use those anymore. Again, it's more of this legacy concept coming through. It's really unfortunate that these things are still included, and I wonder why they still do it. It's hard to explain. This device has a warranty of 2 years. It talks a little bit about the fan that's built into the power supply. The fan's used to try and keep the power supply cool by pulling away hot air and pushing cooler air in. That's the idea of it. And as I said, we can tell, look at this here, it says total power output 400 watts. You can find that if you use your computer a lot and plug in lots of devices inside it, for example lots of SATA hard disk drives, a lot of people will do that. They buy one, then another, and then they start filling up all the SATA connections, and then they also start taking their conversion cables, converting the Molex ends into SATA and plugging in more devices, and you can eventually wear down the machine. Sometimes you might find power outages, but at that point, you'll know yourself, by the time that happens, your power supply is probably making a hell of a racket. So around about that sort of point, you say to yourself, I think I should invest in another power supply with more wattage.